March 16, 1943, 52 north, 35 to 47 west, mid-Atlantic. The cipher room of HMS Veteran pitches 15 degrees to starboard as another North Atlantic swell hammers the destroyer's hull. Leading telegraphist William Hartley braces himself against the steel bulkhead, his fingers hovering over the keyboard of the TypeX Mark II cipher machine secured to the desk before him. The machine weighs 62 pounds. Its olive-drab case bolted to prevent it from becoming a lethal projectile in heavy seas. Through the watertight door behind him, Hartley can hear the muffled thunder of depth charges. The fourth pattern HMS Veteran has dropped in the past 2 hours. He doesn't know how many U-boats are out there. He doesn't need to know. What Hartley does know, what only he and 3 other men aboard this ship know, is that 20 minutes ago, a priority signal arrived from the Admiralty. The message came through the standard naval wireless, encrypted in a cipher the Germans had been reading for months. But this message was different. This message contained intelligence so sensitive that even the ship's captain, Commander Michael Impey, would never learn its true origin. Hartley's hands move across the TypeX keyboard with practiced precision. The machine before him is a marvel of British engineering. 5 rotors where the German Enigma has only 3 or 4. A printing mechanism that eliminates the need for a second operator, and crucially an encryption algorithm the Kriegsmarine's B-Dienst cryptanalysis service has never broken. The message he's about to encrypt reads simply, Convoy SC-122 divert grid AJ 4739 immediate. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know that Bletchley Park decrypted a German Naval Enigma message 3 hours ago revealing U-boat positions. He doesn't know that if SC-122 maintains its current course, 43 merchant ships carrying 250,000 tons of fuel, ammunition and food will sail directly into a wolf pack of 21 U-boats. The TypeX machine's rotors spin with a mechanical clatter that cuts through the destroyer's ambient noise. Each keystroke advances the rotors through their substitution alphabet, creating an encryption so complex that the statistical period, the point at which the cipher pattern repeats, exceeds 900 billion characters. Hartley types the final letter. The machine prints the encrypted text onto a thin strip of paper. He tears it off, places it in a weighted canvas bag, and calls for the duty runner. Commander Impey will receive this message in 90 seconds. He will read it, acknowledge it, and alter course to intercept the convoy's new position. He will never ask how the Admiralty knew where the U-boats were waiting. He has been trained not to ask. This is the system. This is the secret within the secret. This is how Britain is winning the Battle of the Atlantic without the Germans realizing they've already lost. The machine that couldn't be broken. January 1940. Royal Navy Signal School, Portsmouth. Before leading telegraphist Hartley stood in that cipher room off the coast of Newfoundland, before the TypeX became the Royal Navy's lifeline in the Atlantic, the machine itself was nearly rejected by the Admiralty. The Air Ministry had developed it in 1937, adapting the commercial Enigma machine with security enhancements that made it fundamentally different from its German cousin. Wing Commander OGW Lywood had overseen the modifications, additional rotors, a more complex stepping mechanism, and a printing unit that removed the human error factor inherent in Enigma's lightboard system. The Navy's initial order in May 1939 was for just 5 machines, intended for trials at the Admiralty, Malta and Gibraltar. Production was agonizingly slow. By March 1941, only 168 TypeX machines had been delivered to the Royal Navy, forcing the Admiralty to restrict their use to communications between flagships and shore headquarters. Smaller vessels continued to rely on codebooks and deciphering tables, systems the German B-Dienst had been reading since 1940. Sub-Lieutenant James Richardson remembers his first encounter with a TypeX machine in the spring of 1940. He was 23 years old, fresh from cryptographic training, assigned to HMS Renown as a cipher officer. The machine arrived in a wooden crate, marked only with a serial number, and the word "Secret" stenciled in red. 2 Royal Marines stood guard, while Richardson and the ship's signals officer unpacked it. It looked like a typewriter that had been built by a watchmaker, Richardson would later recall. The machine's 5 rotors sat in a row, each capable of being positioned in any of 26 starting positions. Unlike Enigma, which used a plugboard to add an additional layer of encryption, the TypeX relied on the mathematical complexity of its rotor arrangements and stepping mechanism. The Germans had captured a TypeX machine during the evacuation of Dunkirk in June 1940. Their cryptanalysts at the Oberkommando der Marine examined it, recognized its similarities to Enigma, and made a fatal assumption. They believed that if Enigma was secure, then this British variant must be equally secure and equally unbreakable. They were right about the second part. They were catastrophically wrong about the first. But in early 1940, before Bletchley Park began its systematic penetration of German Enigma traffic, before Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman developed the bomb machine, before the capture of German codebooks from U-110 in May 1941, the TypeX served a simpler purpose. It protected Royal Navy operational communications, orders from the Admiralty to fleet commanders, position reports from cruiser squadrons, tactical coordination during convoy operations. The Germans could intercept these messages. Their signals intelligence network was extensive and sophisticated, but they couldn't read them. By late 1942, as the Battle of the Atlantic reached its crisis point, the Royal Navy had distributed over 600 TypeX machines across its surface fleet. Every destroyer, cruiser, and battleship capable of independent operations now carried at least one machine. Larger vessels carried 2 or 3. The system had evolved from a flagship-only luxury to an operational necessity, but the TypeX's true purpose, its secret purpose, was about to begin. Bletchley Park's deadly secret, December 1942. Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire, England. In Hut 8, where the Naval Enigma section worked around the clock, the breakthrough came at 14:37 on December 13th. The German Kriegsmarine had introduced a new Enigma variant in February 1942. The M4 machine, with 4 rotors instead of 3, used exclusively by U-boats and codenamed Triton by the Germans, Shark by the British. For 10 months, Bletchley Park had been effectively blind to U-boat communications. Atlantic convoy losses had skyrocketed. In November 1942 alone, 117 merchant ships totaling 729,160 tons had been sunk. Joan Clark, a cryptanalyst in Hut 8, was the first to notice the pattern. A short weather report transmitted by U-boats every morning at 06:00 contained a predictable structure, a crib in Bletchley terminology. Combined with a captured 4-rotor Enigma codebook from U-559 in October, and the relentless processing power of the new 4-rotor bombers, electromechanical machines capable of testing thousands of rotor configurations per minute, Clark and her colleagues finally cracked Shark. The implications were immediate and terrifying. Commander Edward Travis, the operational head of Bletchley Park's intelligence operations, understood the paradox instantly. Ultra-intelligence, the code name for decrypted Enigma traffic, gave the Allies the ability to read German military communications in near real time. They could see U-boat positions, attack plans, supply routes, and operational orders. But this advantage was fragile. If the Germans ever suspected their codes had been broken, they would change their procedures, introduce new machines, or abandon Enigma entirely. The intelligence windfall would vanish. The dilemma was operational. How do you use intelligence without revealing that you have it? In Hut 3, where intelligence reports were synthesized and distributed, a strict protocol governed the dissemination of ultra-material. Reports could only be sent to commanders with bigot clearance, a security classification higher than top secret. The source of the intelligence could never be mentioned. Ultra information had to be carefully blended with intelligence from conventional sources, aerial reconnaissance, direction finding, coast watchers, and captured documents. If Ultra revealed that a German convoy would be at a specific location at a specific time, RAF Coastal Command would first discover it with a reconnaissance flight, then vector bombers to the target. But at sea, this kind of operational camouflage was nearly impossible. The North Atlantic in 1943 was a vast, empty battlefield stretching 3,000 miles from Newfoundland to Northern Ireland. There were no reconnaissance aircraft with the range to patrol mid-Atlantic gaps. There were no coast watchers. If a convoy suddenly diverted course to avoid a U-boat wolfpack, and if that wolfpack had been positioned in secret, maintaining radio silence until the moment of attack, then the only possible explanation for the diversion was that the Allies were reading German codes. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, was not a fool. His operations staff included experienced intelligence officers who monitored Allied convoy patterns obsessively. Any statistical anomaly, convoys repeatedly avoiding ambush positions, anti-submarine patrols arriving at U-boat locations with suspicious accuracy, would trigger an investigation. The solution emerged from an unlikely collaboration between Bletchley Park, the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Centre in Block D, and the Royal Navy's Cipher staff. It was elegant, layered, and absolutely vital. Ultra-intelligence would never be transmitted in a form that could compromise its source. Instead, it would be re-encrypted. This is where the TypeX machines, sitting in cipher rooms on destroyers and cruisers across the Atlantic, became more than communication devices. They became shields, the two-level system. The system worked like this. At Bletchley Park, cryptanalysts in Hut 8 decrypt a German Enigma message at 09:15. The message reveals that U-boat group Raubgraf, 16 submarines arranged in a patrol line stretching 200 miles across convoy route SC, will be in position by 18 that evening. The decrypt includes precise coordinates, U-boat identification numbers, and attack orders. This intelligence goes to Hut 3, where it's translated, analyzed, and cross-referenced with other sources. By 09:45, a report reaches the Operational Intelligence Centre at the Admiralty in London. The OIC's submarine tracking room, led by Commander Roger Wynne, maintains a massive wall chart showing estimated positions of every German U-boat in the Atlantic. The ultra-intelligence confirms and refines these estimates. At 10 Gaz, the decision is made. Convoy SC-122, currently 400 miles away from the U-boat patrol line, must divert. But the order cannot say divert because we've broken German codes. It cannot reference U-boats by their identification numbers. It cannot be so specific that any intercepting German intelligence analyst could deduce that the source is compromised. Instead, at 10:15, the Admiralty transmits a message to the convoy's escort commander using Naval Cipher number 3, a codebook system the British know has been partially compromised by German B-Dienst. The message is deliberately vague. Report received possible submarine activity, grid square, AJ-47, divert north. This message, encrypted in a code the Germans can read, provides them with exactly the kind of intelligence they expect. A routine convoy diversion based on an unspecified report, possibly from a reconnaissance aircraft or a distant ship sighting. The Germans intercept it, decrypt it, and file it as routine convoy traffic. But 30 minutes later, a second message arrives at HMS Veteran, the convoy escort flagship. This message comes through a different channel, a secure wireless link using TypeX encryption. Leading telegraphist William Hartley, alone in the cipher room, decrypts it using his TypeX machine. This message is far more specific. Ultra indicates Wolfpack 16 boats grid AJ4739 to AJ5104, positioned for interception, 1800 hours. Divert immediate course. 045 maintain until grid AK-12, then resume original heading. Commander Michael Impey receives this second message. He reads it, burns it according to protocol, and alters the convoy's course. He tells his officers that Admiralty intelligence suggests increased U-boat activity ahead. He doesn't mention Ultra. He doesn't mention Enigma. He doesn't mention Bletchley Park. The convoy diverts. The U-boats wait in an empty ocean. The Wolfpack commander, Captain Lieutenant Friedrich Markworth, aboard U-66, reports to Dönitz's headquarters. Convoy failed to appear. Patrol line maintained. This happens dozens of times every month throughout 1943. German operational planning is meticulous, based on convoy routing patterns, aerial reconnaissance from Luftwaffe long-range aircraft, and intelligence from B-Dienst decrypts of British convoy codes. But again and again, convoys slip past ambush positions. The Germans suspect they're being unlucky. They suspect the British have improved their direction-finding capabilities. They suspect that convoy routing has become more unpredictable. They never suspect the truth, that every German naval message encrypted with Enigma is being read at Bletchley Park within hours, and that this intelligence is being securely delivered to British ships using TypeX machines that German cryptanalysts have written off as unbreakable. The two-level system protects the source. The first level, the deliberately compromised naval cipher number 3, provides plausible deniability. The second level, the TypeX encrypted ultra-intelligence, provides operational effectiveness. The Germans see what the British want them to see, a competent but not omniscient enemy. They never see the truth. Operational security. Hiding the source. April 1943, U-boat headquarters, Berlin. Kapitän zur See Hans Meckel, Chief of Staff to Admiral Dönitz, sat in the operations room studying convoy loss reports with growing frustration. The numbers told a disturbing story. In March, U-boats had sunk 108 ships, totaling 627,000 tons. A tactical success. But the operational picture was troubling. Of 47 attempted convoy interceptions, only 19 had made contact. More than half of the carefully positioned Wolfpack ambushes had failed because convoys had inexplicably altered course before reaching the patrol lines. Meckel brought his concerns to Dönitz on April 12th. Could the British be reading German naval codes? Dönitz ordered an immediate investigation. The Kriegsmarine Signals Security Service, under Korvettenkapitän Ludwig Stummel, conducted a comprehensive analysis of Enigma's cryptographic security. Their conclusion, delivered on April 29th, was unequivocal. Enigma remained secure. The mathematical complexity of the four-rotor M4 machine made cryptanalysis impossible without capturing both the machine and the current codebooks. British convoy diversions, Stummel argued, were the result of improved high-frequency direction-finding HFDF capabilities, not code-breaking. Stummel was half right. The Royal Navy had indeed deployed HFDF equipment, Huff-Duff in naval slang, across its escort fleet. These systems could triangulate the position of U-boats when they transmitted radio messages, but HFDF had limitations. It required multiple direction-finding stations to achieve accurate triangulation, and its effective range was less than 150 miles. It couldn't explain how convoys were avoiding wolfpacks that maintained strict radio silence until the moment of attack. The truth was that Bletchley Park had developed specific procedures to protect ultra-intelligence. These procedures, refined through bitter experience, governed every operational use of Enigma decrypts. Rule 1. Never act on ultra-intelligence alone. Always provide a plausible alternative explanation. If Ultra revealed a U-boat position, an RAF reconnaissance flight would be dispatched to discover it before anti-submarine forces were vectored to the location. Rule 2. Never respond to ultra-intelligence too quickly. If a German message was decrypted within 2 hours of transmission, operational responses had to be delayed to suggest the intelligence came from conventional sources. Rule 3. Occasionally, ultra-intelligence had to be ignored. If acting on every decrypt would create a pattern too suspicious to dismiss, some operations had to proceed without Ultra's advantage. This was the cruelest rule. It meant allowing some convoys to be attacked, some ships to be sunk, some men to die, in order to preserve the larger secret. Rule 4. The TypeX encrypted messages containing ultra-intelligence could never be transmitted to shore stations where they might be intercepted and analyzed by German direction-finding networks. They were point-to-point, ship-to-ship communications sent over short ranges using frequency-hopping patterns that made interception difficult. Commander Roger Wynne, head of the submarine tracking room at the Admiralty's OIC, enforced these rules with rigid discipline. His staff, a mix of Royal Navy Reserve officers, civilian analysts, and WRNS, Women's Royal Naval Service plotters, worked 12-hour shifts maintaining the U-boat situation map. Every ultra-decrypt, every direction-finding report, every sighting, every attack was plotted and analyzed. Wynne's estimates of U-boat positions were so accurate that by mid-1943, his tracking room could predict Wolfpack deployment patterns days in advance. But accuracy had to be masked. When Wynne's staff transmitted routing changes to convoy escort commanders, the messages were deliberately vague when sent in the compromised naval cipher number 3 and brutally specific when sent via TypeX. The Germans saw uncertainty. The British commanders received precision. In the cipher room of HMS Veteran, leading telegraphist William Hartley never saw the full picture. He decrypted messages, encrypted responses, and maintained the TypeX machine according to protocol. He changed the rotor settings every 8 hours using sealed daily key sheets delivered by armed courier. He knew the machine was secure. He knew the intelligence was classified beyond top secret. He knew that discussing his work, even with other crew members who held high security clearances, was punishable by court-martial and imprisonment. What he didn't know, what he couldn't be allowed to know, was that the intelligence he processed was saving his life and the lives of every man aboard every ship in every convoy he helped protect. The system worked because it was layered, because it was disciplined, and because hundreds of men like Hartley did their jobs without asking questions they knew wouldn't be answered. Section 6, March 1943, Convoy HX-229, March 16th, 1943, 52nd to go 23, North, 32 to go 19th West. Convoy HX-229 consisted of 40 merchant ships arranged in 9 columns stretching across 4 miles of the North Atlantic. The convoy had departed New York on March 8th, carrying 150,000 tons of cargo, tanks, aircraft, ammunition, food, and oil. Its escort group B4, commanded by Commander A. Tate aboard the destroyer HMS Highlander, consisted of 4 destroyers, 2 corvettes, and an armed trawler. Against them, Admiral Dönitz had deployed 3 Wolfpacks, Group Raubgraf, Group Stürmer, and Group Drenger, a total of 41 U-boats arranged in patrol lines across the convoy routes. This was the decisive moment of the Battle of the Atlantic. Dönitz believed that if he could sink 700,000 tons of shipping per month, he could win the war by strangling Britain's supply lines. March 1943 was his best opportunity. The mid-Atlantic air gap, the 800-mile stretch beyond the range of land-based aircraft, remained unpatrolled. U-boat production had reached 25 submarines per month. German cryptanalysts in B-Dienst were reading British convoy routing codes with less than 48 hours delay. At Bletchley Park, Hut 8 decrypted the German operational orders for the Wolfpack deployment at 11:20 on March 15th. The message, transmitted from U-boat headquarters to all group commanders, detailed the exact positions of the patrol lines, the attack procedures, and the timing. The intelligence reached Commander Wynne's submarine tracking room by 12. The decision was agonizing. HX-229 was sailing directly toward the center of Raubgraf Group. The Wolfpack would make contact within 24 hours, but immediately behind HX-229, sailing the same route, was convoy SC-122, 39 ships with minimal escort. If HX-229 diverted north, it would run into Stürmer Group. If it diverted south, it would merge with SC-122, creating a massive target of 79 ships that the U-boats couldn't miss. At 14 Zar, the Admiralty transmitted the first message to Commander Tate using Naval Cipher number 3. Intelligence indicates increased U-boat activity your route. Maintain vigilance. This message, deliberately vague, provided the Germans with no useful information when they decrypted it hours later. At 14:30, a second message arrived via TypeX. Leading telegraphist aboard HMS Highlander decrypted it in the cipher room. The message was 3 times longer than the first. Ultra Decrypt 1545 indicates Wolfpack Raubgraf. 16 boats positioned, grid AJ 5000 to AJ 5400 patrol line north-south orientation. Group Stürmer. 18 boats grid AJ 6200 to AJ 6500. Evasive routing impossible. Increase escort vigilance. Close convoy formation. Prepare for contact after 1800 hours, March 16th. Commander Tate read the message twice, burned it, and called his escort commanders to a conference. He couldn't tell them about Ultra. He couldn't explain how the Admiralty knew the precise positions and strength of the Wolfpacks. He said only, "Intelligence suggests heavy U-boat presence ahead. We're going to close up the convoy, increase radar watch, and prepare for a fight." At 20:45 on March 16th, U-603 made contact with HX-229's port wing. The battle lasted 3 days. Despite the Ultra warning, despite Commander Tate's preparations, the sheer number of U-boats overwhelmed the escorts. 22 merchant ships from convoys HX-229 and SC-122 were sunk, totaling 146,596 tons. It was one of the worst convoy battles of the war, but it could have been catastrophic. Without ultra-intelligence, without the TypeX encrypted warning that allowed Tate to position his escorts and prepare his defenses, the losses would have been doubled. German post-battle analysis estimated that only half of the Wolfpack's torpedo attacks had been successful. The convoy's evasive maneuvers, the aggressive counterattacks by escorts, and the unexpectedly tight convoy formation had disrupted the planned attack sequence. Dönitz never knew that Commander Tate had been reading his operational orders. The Kriegsmarine investigation into the battle concluded that British radar and HFDF had detected the U-boats, forcing them to submerge prematurely and lose optimal attack positions. The TypeX machines had protected the secret. The 2-level system had worked. Ultra survived to fight another day. The German suspicion, May 1943. Kriegsmarine headquarters, Berlin. The losses were mounting. In April, 15 U-boats had been sunk. In the first 3 weeks of May, 31 more. Admiral Dönitz faced a crisis that went beyond operational setbacks. His submarine force, the weapon that was supposed to win the war, was being hunted with a precision that seemed impossible. On May 23rd, Dönitz made a decision that shocked his staff. He withdrew all U-boats from the North Atlantic. For the first time since 1940, the convoy routes were clear. The Battle of the Atlantic, which had claimed 3,500 merchant ships and 783 U-boats over 4 years, had reached its turning point. But Dönitz still didn't know why he was losing. Korvettenkapitän Ludwig Stummel, head of signal security, launched a second investigation into Enigma's integrity. This time, the analysis went deeper. Stummel's team examined every aspect of German naval communications, encryption procedures, machine distribution, codebook security, radio procedures, and traffic patterns. They looked for correlations between German operations and Allied responses. They calculated probabilities, analyzed timing, and searched for patterns. Their report, completed in June 1943, ran to 200 pages. The conclusion remained the same. Enigma was secure. The statistical analysis showed no evidence of systematic code breaking. Allied convoy routing changes could be explained by improved radar, HFDF, and aerial reconnaissance. The high U-boat losses in May were attributed to the deployment of Allied escort carriers, longer-range patrol aircraft, and improved depth charges. Stummel's team had missed the truth by a narrow margin. They had noticed that Allied responses to German operations were often too fast, too precise, and too successful to be explained by conventional intelligence. But they had also noticed that these responses were inconsistent. Sometimes convoys avoided wolf packs, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes Allied anti-submarine forces appeared at U-boat positions with suspicious accuracy. Sometimes they were hundreds of miles away. The inconsistency saved Ultra. It was the result of Rule 3, the deliberate decision to occasionally ignore Ultra intelligence in order to avoid creating an impossible pattern. Bletchley Park and the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center had sacrificed tactical advantages to preserve strategic security. Ships had been sunk, men had died, and convoys had been attacked when they could have been saved, all to maintain the illusion that British intelligence was good, but not perfect. The Germans saw that imperfection and concluded that their codes were safe. There was a second factor: the German cryptanalysts' own success. B-Dienst was reading British Naval Cipher No. 3 throughout 1942 and early 1943. They were providing Donitz with intelligence on convoy positions, routing, and timing. This created a cognitive trap. If the British could read German codes, Stummel reasoned, why would they continue using codes the Germans had broken? The continued use of compromised British codes suggested that the British didn't know they were compromised, which suggested that British code-breaking capabilities were limited. The logic was sound, the conclusion was wrong. The British knew their naval codes were compromised. They continued using them because they needed the Germans to see routine convoy traffic, to maintain the illusion of normalcy, and to provide a plausible explanation for operational decisions that were actually based on ultra-intelligence. The TypeX machines, invisible to German analysis, protected this deception. The Germans had captured a TypeX at Dunkirk. They had examined it. They had concluded it was secure, but they had never intercepted TypeX traffic in quantity. The machine was used primarily for ship-to-ship communications over short ranges. The Royal Navy's strict radio discipline meant that TypeX encrypted messages were rarely transmitted where German direction-finding stations could intercept them. And even if they had been intercepted, even if German cryptanalysts had collected thousands of encrypted messages, breaking TypeX would have required resources, time, and mathematical insights that Germany didn't possess in 1943. The five-rotor system, the complex stepping mechanism, and the absence of the Enigma plugboard created a cipher that was fundamentally different from the machines German cryptanalysts understood. In his personal diary on May 24, 1943, Donitz wrote, "The enemy has succeeded in gaining the advantage in submarine detection. Our losses have become unbearable." He blamed technology. He blamed tactics. He blamed bad luck. He never blamed the four-rotor Enigma machine sitting in the radio room of every U-boat under his command. The human price of silence, September 1943, HMS Veteran, North Atlantic. Leading telegraphist William Hartley had been at sea for 8 months. His station was the Cipher room, a steel box 8 feet by 10 feet, located 2 decks below the waterline. The TypeX machine sat before him, its rotors cleaned and oiled according to the maintenance schedule. Around him, 3 filing cabinets held code books, key sheets, and cipher instructions, all marked "Top Secret Bigot" in red stamps. Hartley had processed 427 messages since March. Most were routine, position reports, operational orders, weather updates, supply requests. But 17 of those messages, he kept count in his head, never writing it down, had been different. They had contained intelligence so specific, so detailed, so impossibly accurate that even Hartley, who had been trained never to speculate about sources, understood that something extraordinary was happening. He couldn't tell anyone, not the ship's captain, not his fellow telegraphists, not even his family in the carefully censored letters he wrote every Sunday. The Official Secrets Act he had signed upon completing cipher training was explicit. Discussion of classified material, even after the war, was punishable by 14 years' imprisonment. So Hartley kept his silence, and men died who might have been saved, and ships sank that might have been protected, and the war ground on because the secret was more valuable than any individual life, including his own. In Block D at Bletchley Park, the strain of maintaining ultra-security was breaking people. The cryptanalysts, translators and intelligence analysts who decrypted German messages worked 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. They saw everything: U-boat attack plans, Luftwaffe bombing raids, Wehrmacht troop movements, SS deportation orders. They knew which convoys would be attacked, which cities would be bombed, which targets would be hit, and they couldn't warn anyone directly. Diana Russell Clark, a civilian translator in Hut 3, later recalled the agony of decrypting a Luftwaffe message detailing a planned bombing raid on Coventry in November 1940. The intelligence reached Churchill's war cabinet. The decision was made not to evacuate the city or increase its air defences, because doing so would alert the Germans that their codes had been broken. Coventry was bombed. 568 people died. Clark spent the rest of the war wondering if she had blood on her hands. The answer, from a strategic perspective, was that she had saved thousands more lives by protecting Ultra. But strategy doesn't comfort nightmares. Commander Roger Wynne, in the submarine tracking room, made life-and-death decisions every day based on incomplete information and impossible calculations. Which convoy to divert, which wolf pack to avoid, which U-boat to hunt. Every decision saved lives, every decision cost lives. The mathematics of war reduced human beings to tonnages, percentages, and acceptable losses. In June 1943, Wynne received ultra-intelligence revealing that U-boat U-194 was damaged, low on fuel, and returning to base along a predictable route. He could have vectored a destroyer group to intercept it, but U-194's route took it past convoy OS-48, which was also in the area. If the destroyer group diverted to hunt the U-boat, the convoy's escort would be weakened. If U-194 was allowed to escape, it might repair, refuel, and return to sink ships in future operations. Wynne made the decision: protect the convoy. U-194 escaped. 3 months later, it sank 2 merchant ships in the Caribbean. Wynne never second-guessed his decision. He had made the calculation. The convoy was more valuable than the U-boat, but he carried those 2 ships and their crews in his memory for the rest of his life. This was the price of the 2-level system. It wasn't just the complexity of maintaining TypeX machines and encryption protocols. It was the weight of knowledge that couldn't be shared, decisions that couldn't be explained, and sacrifices that had to be made in silence. Leading telegraphist Hartley processed his 428th message on September 12, 1943. It was a convoy routing change based on ultra-intelligence that had revealed a Wolfpack deployment. The convoy diverted. The U-boats found nothing. 37 ships carrying fuel, ammunition and food reached Liverpool safely. Hartley would never know that his work that day had saved approximately 1,800 merchant seamen and Royal Navy personnel. He would never receive a medal, a commendation, or public recognition. His role in the war would remain classified until 1974, when the British government finally acknowledged the existence of Ultra. But in that cipher room, 2 decks below the waterline, with the Atlantic pressing against the steel hull and the TypeX machine humming beneath his fingers, William Hartley knew he was part of something that mattered. He didn't know what. He didn't need to know what. He just needed to keep the secret. Breaking point. The Atlantic turns, August 1943. Operational Intelligence Center, Admiralty, London. The wall chart in the submarine tracking room told a story that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. In May, 71 Allied merchant ships had been sunk in the Atlantic, totaling 398 tons. In June, the number dropped to 37 ships. In July, 24. In August, 11. U-boat losses moved in the opposite direction. In May, 41 U-boats had been sunk. In June, 17. In July, 37. The Kriegsmarine submarine force, which had numbered 240 operational boats in March, was hemorrhaging crews faster than Dönitz could replace them. The Battle of the Atlantic had turned. The combination of ultra-intelligence, escort carriers, long-range B-24 Liberator patrol aircraft, improved radar, and aggressive hunter-killer groups had broken the Wolfpack offensive. But the margin of victory was narrower than post-war histories would acknowledge. The Allies were winning because they could read German operational orders, deploy forces with precision, and avoid ambushes that would have been catastrophic. And they were winning because the TypeX machines, distributed across hundreds of Royal Navy and Royal Canadian Navy ships, allowed that intelligence to be transmitted securely without compromising its source. Commander Roger Wynn's tracking room staff had perfected the two-level communication system by mid-1943. When Ultra revealed U-boat positions, the OIC would transmit a vague advisory in Naval Cipher number 3, still partially compromised, still being read by German B-Dienst, suggesting possible submarine activity in a general area. This message provided the Germans with expected intelligence. The British had some awareness of U-boat presence, probably from HFDF or reconnaissance. 30 minutes later, a TypeX encrypted message would follow, containing precise coordinates, U-boat identification numbers, estimated courses and speeds, and tactical recommendations. Escort commanders received actionable intelligence. The Germans saw only what they expected to see. The system had become so refined that by August 1943, convoy routing was being adjusted in real time based on ultra-decrypts. A typical scenario. At 10:00, Bletchley Park decrypts a German message ordering U-653 to move to a new patrol position. By 10:45, the submarine tracking room updates its wall chart and calculates that convoy HX-251 will pass within 20 miles of U-653's new position at 18 GA. By 11 GA, a routing change is transmitted via TypeX to the escort commander. By 12 GA, the convoy alters course. By 18 GA, U-653 waits in an empty ocean, while HX-251 passes 60 miles to the north. This happened dozens of times every week. The Germans noticed the pattern but misinterpreted it. Kapitän Zursee Hans Meckel, analyzing convoy diversions in July 1943, concluded that the British had deployed a new generation of long-range reconnaissance aircraft with improved radar. The explanation was logical. It was plausible. It was wrong. The truth was that Bletchley Park's Hut 8 was now decrypting German Naval Enigma traffic within 4 to 6 hours of transmission. The 4-rotor bombs, running 24 hours a day, could test rotor configurations at a rate that made systematic decryption possible. Joan Clark and her team had developed procedures for rapid analysis of U-boat traffic, identifying cribs from routine messages and exploiting operational patterns. The intelligence pipeline, from Bletchley Park to the Admiralty to ships at sea, now operated with industrial efficiency. Messages moved through secure teleprinter links, encrypted in TypeX, never touching conventional communications networks. The system was compartmentalized, secure, and invisible to German signals intelligence. By September 1943, the Allies were sinking U-boats faster than Germany could build them. Dönitz's plan to strangle Britain's supply lines had failed. The Kriegsmarine withdrew its submarines from the North Atlantic hunting grounds, repositioning them to the Mediterranean and the Arctic, where Allied anti-submarine capabilities were weaker. The Battle of the Atlantic was over. Britain had survived, and the Germans still didn't know why they had lost. In the cipher room of HMS Veteran, leading telegraphist William Hartley processed fewer messages after September. The convoy battles that had consumed the spring and summer of 1943 were now rare. The U-boats were gone. The Atlantic was, if not safe, at least survivable. Hartley maintained the TypeX machine according to protocol. He changed the daily keys. He filed the decrypts. He kept the secret. He would keep it for 31 more years. Legacy of the double cipher. The two-level encryption system pioneered by British naval intelligence in World War II established principles that would shape military communication security for decades. The concept was elegant. Use one cipher for deception and another for truth. Show the enemy what you want them to see while protecting what you can't afford to lose. The TypeX machine remained in British military service until the 1960s, long after the war ended. Modified variants, including the Mark 22 introduced in 1948, were used by NATO forces throughout the Cold War. The machine that German cryptanalysts had dismissed as an Enigma clone became the foundation for post-war Allied communication security. But the TypeX's greatest legacy wasn't technological, it was operational. The procedures developed to protect ultra-intelligence, compartmentalization, plausible deniability, layered encryption, and controlled dissemination became standard practice for signals intelligence operations. The National Security Agency, GCHQ, and their counterparts worldwide still follow principles established in the cipher rooms of destroyers and the tracking rooms of the Admiralty between 1940 and 1945. The men who operated those systems remained silent for a generation. The Official Secrets Act that bound them prohibited disclosure until 1974, when the British government declassified the existence of Ultra. By then, many of the cryptanalysts, signals intelligence officers, and cipher operators who had won the Battle of the Atlantic were dead, their contributions unrecorded and unrecognized. Leading telegraphist William Hartley survived the war. He returned to civilian life, worked as an accountant in Manchester, and never discussed his wartime service in detail. When the ultra-secret was finally revealed in 1974, he read the newspaper accounts with quiet satisfaction. He had been part of something that mattered. He had kept the secret. The system had worked. Commander Roger Wynne, whose submarine tracking room had orchestrated the defeat of the U-boat offensive, received a CBE, Commander of the Order of the British Empire, in 1943. The citation mentioned distinguished service in naval intelligence, without specifying what that service had been. Wynne returned to his pre-war career as a barrister, argued cases before the High Court, and never spoke publicly about Ultra. He died in 1972, 2 years before the secret was declassified. Joan Clark, one of Bletchley Park's most accomplished cryptanalysts, received no public recognition during her lifetime. She continued working in signals intelligence after the war, eventually becoming deputy head of Hut 8's successor organization. Her role in breaking the four-rotor Naval Enigma, the achievement that turned the Battle of the Atlantic, remained classified until after her death in 1996. The final assessment of the two-level system's impact is difficult to quantify, but impossible to ignore. Between December 1942 and May 1943, when ultra-intelligence became systematically available and the TypeX distribution was complete, Allied merchant ship losses in the Atlantic dropped by 75%. U-boat losses increased by 400%. The convoy system, which had been on the verge of collapse, became sustainable. Strategic analyses conducted after the war estimated that ultra-intelligence shortened the Battle of the Atlantic by 1 to 2 years. This meant approximately 3,000 merchant ships preserved, 50,000 lives saved, and millions of tons of supplies delivered to Britain that would otherwise have been lost. The TypeX machines, sitting in cipher rooms on destroyers and cruisers, had made that possible. Not because they were sophisticated, though they were, not because they were unbreakable, though the Germans never broke them, but because they were part of a system that understood the difference between having intelligence and using intelligence, the secret within the secret, the cipher within the cipher, the British naval communication system that protected the source while delivering the intelligence, the two-level encryption that won the Battle of the Atlantic without the enemy ever knowing why they lost. In 1943, in the cold steel cipher room of HMS Veteran, leading telegraphist William Hartley typed his messages into a TypeX machine, never knowing the full scope of what he was protecting. He was one of thousands who kept the secret, one of thousands who won a battle without recognition, one of thousands whose silence was their greatest contribution to victory. The machine sat before him, its rotors spinning through billions of possible combinations, creating ciphers that couldn't be broken and protecting intelligence that couldn't be compromised. In the North Atlantic, convoys passed through waters where U-boats waited in vain. In Berlin, Admiral Dönitz studied charts and wondered why his submarines were dying. In London, Commander Wynne updated his wall chart and planned the next convoy route. And at Bletchley Park, in the wooden huts and concrete blocks where the war was being won one decrypt at a time, the cryptanalysts worked through another night, breaking codes and saving lives, one message at a time. The system worked because it had to. The secret was kept because it mattered, and the TypeX machines, humming quietly in ships across the Atlantic, delivered the intelligence that made victory possible. This was the cipher within the cipher. This was how Britain survived.